So you have a vision in you, and you're discovering that, you're exegeting your community, you're finding out where those two things intersect with each other. And then we're going for it, and we're going to communicate, and create allies. All right? And we'll pause there for a second. As you were having lunch and thinking, was there any questions or thoughts that we could jump in on before I start rolling again? Mm-hmm.
At what point do you incorporate the vision of others? A lot of what I'm hearing is it starts with you, and you communicate your vision. I think there are other spirit-led people in your church.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you incorporate the things that they're passionate about, and how do you...
It's a great question. It would very much depend on how long you've been there and what that vision is. So one of the things that's hard, I just did this yesterday. I have a guy, he's actually in his 80s. He was a restaurant owner in town. He's a brilliant man that is highly capable and has a great idea to help ex-cons as they come out, integrate back into society. And he's been talking to me about this idea for a long time. And I've considered it. He's written up some very wonderful proposals. And I just told him yesterday we're not doing his idea. And I tried to say to him, because he'll often kind of say, well, you know, I'm old. And I said, Mark, it's not your age. It's not the concept. It's not your ability to pull it off. It's just not for us right now, because we have 5 or 6 other things going on and can't put another one on. So a lot of it depends on the idea. And then if you've been at a ministry a month or two, and you're walking into a place that has vision already, I think that happens a lot when there's a transition. There's a group of people who step up and take hold of the church out of necessity, and they've implemented their ideas. They're not jerks. They're not control freaks or anything like that. They're just like nobody else was doing it, and I think we should, as a new leader, come along and participate with them, understand that, see if we get excited about it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When it's time for us to kind of take over the visionary role, so to say, what we tend to do is, if your idea can morph under that big umbrella, don't let it give it away, we'll let it morph. Our little saying is best idea wins. That's the way that we work, so we'll let it morph. If it doesn't morph well, but it's not hurting us, we'll let it atrophy. So we'll let it continue to happen, but we'll quit pouring energy and time and resources into it and let it atrophy. If it's an idea that's working against the broader idea, then we'll go through the pain of killing it. So it really just kind of depends on where that is. And sometimes I think in our commitment to being the body of Christ, because we I think all agree that God forms the body, each and every part of it, right? And so He's bringing us together. That doesn't mean that what everybody wants to do is actually healthy for the body. And so sorting that through, working that through is a hard thing. Sometimes people have an idea and it's a very low impact idea, and you can just let them do what they want to do. Sometimes they have an idea and it's a very high impact idea and you can't do it. I get a lot, I bet you guys do too, like my cousin's a missionary in Uganda, can we support them? I was like, well, no. Well, but they're doing the Lord's work. I know. I mean, praise God for that. There's lots of people doing lots of good things, and we can't support them. There's a system and our philosophy to it that we have to stick with. So it's that kind of stuff. It's hard. I hate saying no to people. I'm no good at it. I make my associates do it. Be honest with you. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, go over there. One of the great, I love this for, I still have a couple guys like this, but when we started Grace, I was 28, and I had an associate that was in his 50s. So we had this backward relationship, but I loved it because somebody would walk in and didn't know us. They would look at us and always assume he was the senior pastor. So I'd just duck out the side door. And he's like, "You are the biggest jerk I've ever met." I do that to him all the time. Like, I like this little setup. So it's a great question. Others, any other questions we can talk about? Yes?
One thing that's awesome about when others have vision is that they're at least moving.
Yeah.
And if you can redirect them towards what your vision, they could be to become the next leader of that or volunteer of that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's a great insight because a lot of times folks who have vision recognize a good idea when they see it. And so if when you come with a good idea, they'll lock into that, and they become your greatest allies with it.
I listened to something recently that said, when we present a vision, then back away, and if you're in a board situation where it's been stuck, there's nothing better for them to come back with your idea.
Yeah.
And then it'll go through just like nothing. All you got to do is just kind of support it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what New was saying, leak that out, leak that out,
Yep.
leak that out, plant that seed, and then, because we do want other people to have the vision.
Yep.
I mean,
Ownership. And some of you are, I'm not as good at this. My wife is amazing at it. Some of you are masterful at having other people think that your idea is their idea. My wife's incredible with that. I watch her talk people into stuff, and I'm like, how do you? She's like, I don't know. It's a gift from God, And she's not being manipulative. It's the process that she goes through and kind of lets them self-discover, and they walk away saying, you know what we ought to do? And for her, it's usually exercise-oriented. We ought to have a 5K. And I'm like, how did you do that, you Wonder Woman, you woman of mystery, right? But so anything that gives that ownership is awesome. I was talking to guys at my table here over lunch, and they said, do you what do you do when you feel like quitting and getting tired? Lance and I were actually talking about that, getting tired, and does that still happen? And I told him, yeah, I felt like quitting on my way out here yesterday. We had it's funny, on Easter weekend, we had a fun weekend and had a neat article in the paper, and I was like, we're like amazing. And the next weekend, the police are being called on one of our new locations because the noise is too loud. The neighbor came over, threatened some of my staff. We thought we were going to have a guy arrested, this and that and everything. And I'm like, yeah, that stuff, it de-energizes me. It's discouraging. This stuff never goes away, right? You never, ever get above that. And on my way out here yesterday, some things didn't go well, and it took me forever to get out of town, and blah, 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 blah. And like the first hour of the trip, my kids are watching a movie, and I'm just steaming and telling the Lord how I can't believe I have to do this, and I should quit, and I should go take another church that doesn't have problems, and that'll, right? All that goes away. But I was with a guy in Texas, a guy named Matt Chandler. He's a great guy. If you ever get to read his stuff or listen to his stuff, we were hanging out a few weeks ago, and we were talking about this. And he said something great. I kind of heard it before. I don't know why it stuck with me, but he said this. I thought it was awesome. He said, I don't try to manage my time. I try to manage my energy. And that's what we were talking about. I said, I've realized over the years, I used to think I was in the wrong church. I used to think I just have these difficult people. Or I used to think if I could go to some church and they had these problems solved already, right? I realized that my job is to solve problems and lead people, right? So that's never going to go away. And I realized that when I'm ready to quit, it's not because I hate what I'm doing, it's because I'm out of energy. And I need to get away, and I need to refresh my body and my spirit, right? So watching TV for the night does not relax me. It numbs my brain, but I usually am worked up about whatever's happening on the TV. I can't believe that LeBron made that pass and Kyrie didn't land that shot, right? It's not necessarily relaxing. Getting away with the Lord like as de-energized as I was yesterday, after spending the morning with you guys, I'm that energized. It's like being with colleagues, being with friends, talking about stuff you care about. It just refreshes the soul. And then I'm going to hang out and play with my kids all night. That's going to refresh my soul because I feel like I'm in a fathering deficit because I've been dealing with problems. You see what I'm saying? And so the I'm going to quit and I'm done and I hate my life stuff. It doesn't matter if you've get to implement your vision or not. It's when you're connected with Christ and feeling. I love what Paul says in Colossians. He says, I strenuously contend with this power that God has placed in me. Right? I'm looking for that. So none of this makes this go away. The fun thing about working on your vision, and I like to say this at Grace a lot, we work on our dreams. We're not working on our problems. So that's the fun thing when vision starts to take root. You're working, you're tired, you're spent, but working on your dreams is energizing. Working against your problems is de-energizing. My neighbors that freaked out about our subwoofer de-energized me Sunday. Being here, sleeping in a hotel, didn't sleep well, long trip, but I'm energized and I'm working on something I would believe in or value. Does that make sense? And that's the fun thing with it. I like to say sometimes you're going to pay a price for ministry. So if you're going to pay the price for it, at least pay the price getting you to where you want to be. Right? So tackle those things that move you forward, and that's what vision is. Okay. Talking about implementing this vision now. So we're going to communicate. We're going to create leaders. Here's the third thing. Create a catchy, non-churchy way to communicate the vision. Catchy, non-churchy way to communicate the vision. We've talked about this a little bit. So this is the non-wordy vision statement. It's more of a catchphrase. And in my view, it should be understandable to an unchurched person. Okay. If you're looking at people 40 and under, we should remember that 50-ish%, depending on where you live, it's probably higher, of those people were not raised in and do not understand church culture. So we fought a cultural war for 30 years, right? And we lost it. The culture's gone. Now, you're not going to put gay marriage back in the bottle. None of that's coming back. So when we go to reach people, we have to remember that the culture has shifted. And we have to communicate with a missionary's mindset than a shepherding a flock that is very ingrained in what we know. So we have to change our languages, and we have to change the way that we communicate. One of the things that we do at Grace is when we're teaching a guy to preach. You guys ever play Taboo, where you hit the buzzer? You ever play that little game? We'll have a guy practice, and we'll have a taboo buzzer. Or if you want to do this for fun with your small group leader, something like that, have somebody give their testimony, which would just saying that word would immediately cause a buzzer to go off without being churchy or without saying a word that you would not understand if you did not grow up in church. It's a great thing to do with your small group leaders. So lead me to Christ without assuming that I know anything. Well, let me tell you how to have a relationship with Jesus. Bam, 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 bam. Right? Because to a 24-year-old, a relationship with Christ is going to be interpreted as something sexual. Right? Jesus had a close, intimate relationship with John. Jesus was gay. That's the way it's going to register. So when you're looking to cast vision, especially the younger you go, you have to find languages that make sense. And this vision, this catchy little vision statement, It's a whole nother conversation we could have about reaching a millennial, and I don't want to get too sidetracked by that, but this catchy little vision statement is one of those things. If it's not catchy, ours, Newt asked me a minute ago, say my vision statement. I told you the formal one. What our folks know is know it, live it, give it away. That's all they know. Know it, live it, give it away. Right? It's catchy. There's nothing churchy about it. It's only after you start getting to know us that you know that it is the gospel and the story of Jesus. But know it, live it, give it away. Right? So people who are unchurched can start to get their head around that idea. Okay? So you're looking for a little phrase like that. It's not wordy. It's not a big vision statement. You may have a formal vision statement or formal mission statement. We do too. That's the Grace Church is a gospel center movement. That's what that is. That's a formal mission statement. You walk into any of our buildings and it'll have know it, live it, give it away. There's a know it department, a live it department, a give it away department. All right? And you can probably figure that out pretty quick. What would the know it department oversee? Yeah, anything that has to do with formally learning the Bible. What would the live it department oversee? Community and discipleship. And what would the give it away department oversee? Yeah, missions, evangelism, outreach. You guys know it, live it, give it away. You just explain Grace Church. Okay? So you're looking for something like that, right? Don't steal, know it, live it, give it away. It's copyrighted. I'll sue you. But that you're looking for something like that you can just rattle off your tongue. You do not have to know what the word means. So you don't want to say discipleship, evangelism, and exhortation. It just doesn't make sense to people quickly. But you catch it. And I wrote down here, it should fit on a T-shirt. So you should be able to have a T-shirt on it, and when somebody reads that T-shirt, it's not weird. Okay? So when you can look at that vision and start thinking in those terms and kind of boil it down into that, that's when it will start to take hold. And that, by the way, is when you will start to use it a lot. That's what happens. Newt was alluding to these formal vision and mission statements that nobody ever uses. It's because they're not memorable, right? So we, believe it or not, we worked very, very, very hard to come up with know it, live it, give it away. And believe it or not, on our staff, you get in trouble if you abbreviate that. So you're not allowed to do that. Anyway, we made it like the vernacular of the church. And if you start abbreviating it or using an insider language with it, you'll get yelled at best, perhaps flogged in the parking lot. Just depends how bad you were. Okay? Make sense? Now, if catchphrases aren't your deal, this is a great way to start building ownership. Right? So one of the things when we started doing this, I basically on a Sunday morning said, hey, if you're in marketing or advertising, would you let us know? We have a communication card, connection card, we call it. Got 10 or 15 names on that. Hey, would you guys come have breakfast with me? Yep. Here's my problem. I'm trying to say all of this, and all of this, and this catchy little, I need a catchy little phrase. That turned into a team. We don't have committees. It turned into a team. A bunch of brainstorms, came up with a little phrase. That turned into, hey, if you're a graphic artist, would you let us know? Or if you know one. That turned into a logo. See how that works? And it's a great way to start. I'm sitting there casting vision with a group of people as we're working on a problem together. So it's fun that way. All right, number 4 then is preach on the vision. Preach on the vision. So, renewing the vision every 60 days. I wrote down every 30 days. I want to revisit that vision in a different way every 30 days. This is all this communicate stuff. So if you look back through my sermon files for the last 15 years, you would find all kinds of things like this. You would find a series called the Know It, Live It, Give It Away series. You would find a series called This is Grace. You would find a series called The Church in Motion. You would find probably several series now, all these years later, it's called This is Grace, or Welcome to Grace, or I Am Grace, or right? And there, probably in those 15 years, there has been 15 or more sermon series, 4 to 6 week series, in which all we have done is parsed the vision and preached it through, right? And we will do some version of that every fall. We do it every fall because we have Bible camp. We don't call it Vacation Bible School. One of the things that we do at Grace is we try to secularize the names. VBS is a church thing. Kids don't go to Bible schools or karate school or soccer school. They go to camp. We just call it Bible camp, right? Made sense to everybody. Bible camp is actually a very massive event for us. And so we, working with the kids, we want to play to their parents. The series right after Bible camp is always a family, marriagey kind of a series. And the one right after that is always This is Grace. Some version of that. Okay? We're either going to talk through the vision or talk through things that the vision has influenced. So we're going to preach it. We're going to put kind of the authority of the pulpit, the influence of the pulpit behind it. As we preach it, we're going to small group it. So what we're going to do is we're going to write curriculum for all of our small groups, and we're going to make sure that our leaders are well trained, and they're going to walk people through that in a small group environment. So it's all going to be very, very ingrained. We're going to decorate with our vision, literally. So when you go into our buildings, they all have some artistic expression of know it, live it, give it away. You walk into one of our lobbies, and it's kind of this well-done, professional-looking thing. At one of our other campuses, one of the guys there is a metal worker. Actually, I'm kind of jealous of these. I'm thinking about stealing it. Little senior pastor rank pull in here. But we have logos for each of these things. He took a sheet of steel and cut it. It's amazing, and then let it rust outside. It's incredible looking, and that's their logo. One of our other buildings would have banners. So it's the decorating motif, right? Everywhere you look is know it, live it, give it away. We're going to look to celebrate and restate the vision constantly. So when we give announcements, we don't give announcements about events. We never announce times, details, or cost publicly. All that stuff's written down. You don't remember it when people say it anyways. What we announce is the motivation and the vision of the event, right? So we look at Bible camp and say, man, we're so excited that we get to help kids know Jesus and just give away who Christ is and his love for them at this event. This is going to be a blast. So you're going to see all these details in the program. This is one of the biggest things that we do as a church because it lets us connect with kids, et cetera, et cetera. Right? That's going to be an announcement. So all of our announcements are going to be under this umbrella of know it, live it, give it away, and we're going to weave it in there a little bit, even as we're going to go through it. We want to pick up catchphrases that are woven into sermons and talks. Okay? So when I say, Grace, we don't believe that God gave the church to the church alone. We believe that God gave the church to the world. That would be a way of expressing what part of know it, live it, give it away. Give it away, right? So there's all kinds of little... at Grace, we believe that if you're not sharing your life with someone and allowing them to share their life with you, you can't actually obey Jesus. That's an expression of what? Live it, right? So it's that kind of stuff. We would say at Grace, if you don't know the Bible, it's hard to know God. You can't really know God if you don't know the Bible. Right? So we're gonna always be working that in somehow. It's always going to bounce back to those things. Okay? Yeah.
How does develop over time?
It depends on who is saying it, and it depends on how easy it is for you to come up with it. So all of those things are things that I would have originated, for instance, these ones. And I would have said them because it's what I'm going to say anyways, because my vision comes from my shape that intersected with the needs of my community. That makes sense?
The reason I'm asking, I feel like my shape is I always like something newer.
Okay.
And so I feel tied down by saying the same thing over and over. I know part of vision casting is tweaking the wording a little bit, but there's tremendous value in being able to repeat an idea over and over and over. But what if your shape is so that you don't like that?
So I would repeat the idea, but not the phrase. So I would lean into your strengths. I'm actually not this good at that. But I know pastors that will actually sit and work at crafting that phrase in new ways. And if I was you, I would do that, right? I have a friend out in Arizona. He's his name's Chad Moore. He's masterful at it. And he has a little notebook, and it's him working phrases. Most of my stuff pops into my head while I'm talking, But that's what I would do with it. But I would look at not necessarily every sermon, but every 30 days or so, I would look and say, have we been off course on this? How can I weave this into? And if your vision is broad enough and it's all based biblically, so every aspect of what we're teaching can affect know it, live it, give it away, right? Craft it, work it, steal it, rip it off. Not from me. Mine are copyrighted. I'll sue you. Just saying. They're not. You can rip them off, right? Etc. Okay? When you're thinking about this, preaching it, one of the things that we do is every year we have this State of the Church address. That's an idea I ripped off directly from Rick Warren years and years and years ago. So in the very first part of the year, I'll give what's called the State of the Church address. And basically what I'll do is I'll look at numbers or programs or whatever it is that we're doing, and I will quickly report on the measurements of know it, live it, give it away. Hey guys, this last year we started 30 new life groups, right? This last year, this many people went to, we call them Christian Life Electives, which is our Sunday school classes. We have this many kids in the Moody program, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? This last year, this many people accepted Christ. This is what we did missionally. I'll kind of remind everybody and report on that State of the Church. That's the first 15 minutes of the address. The next 15, 20 minutes is all in 2015. What we're going to do is we're going to target this, and this. And we'll kind of lay those things out. We do that every January, and then in August, September, kind of at the beginning of the ministry year, we'll do a mini State of the Church address. And I'll kind of give the update on what's going on with those things. But we'll kind of be that formal of measuring and communicating the vision. Sunday morning. No, it's the sermon.
It's the sermon. Okay, that's what
Yeah. And I'll usually say something like, if you're our guest today, we're going to do something different, explain that. And I'll say, but this is a great opportunity to be be here today because you'll really get a feel of what grace is about, and kind of go through that. And we've done that for years, and it's actually a lot of fun to look back on the State of the Church addresses because the vision gets bigger. So there's one of my first State of the Church address, literally the vision was to put a roof on the building so the sound system didn't short out. And then we also hope to replace some carpet this year. I mean, that was like big vision back in the day. And then over the years, those things almost become maintenance, literally, issues, and you move on to other things. Okay. I just put here in my notes, if these sermons are not preached with a tear in your eye, then they may not be seated deeply enough in your heart. So these sermons are not repeats. These sermons are not utilitarian. These are the sermons that you have to discipline yourself not to preach every week. Right? So they're passions. Remember, we're all the way back at the beginning. These are passions. And if I wasn't careful as a pastor, I would preach on evangelism every single week. Right? So I have to discipline myself not to do that. Well, evangelism may not be your number one passion, it may be something else, and whatever that else is, maybe it's marriage or whatever, that's what starts to be the vision of the church. So that's what I'm talking about with these messages and these repeat series. Okay. By the way, guys, don't ever be afraid to preach stuff twice or 3 times or 10. People don't remember anyways. I cannibalize my old sermons all the time. All the time. And that's part of how you get the consistency of the message. Right? So, do that. And then I said, don't be afraid to use someone else's voice who communicates better. If communication is not your strong point, but this vision is your passion, don't be afraid to bring someone in to communicate it initially for you. Don't be afraid of a video clip, right? Sometimes we get taboo-y about that stuff. It's silly. But don't be afraid for someone else to be your voice if you trust them and they are expressing your vision. Right? I try to tell church planners all the time, I think church planners spend way too much time preparing sermons. In fact, I think most pastors do, just to be honest with you. And we should spend less time preparing sermons and more time preparing people and implementing vision. Because I think we should work hard at sermons, but I think we overrate them. And we underrate what it means to have a relational influence and a trust for doing things. Okay. So don't be afraid of that and using those things even on a Sunday morning. So. Okay. Any other questions about that? The preaching side of it?
When you do that, and this isn't asked in a critical way at all, just I'm trying to understand or get my head around what you just said. It's not really an exegesis type message, but one that you're communicating vision. So you do have some kind of scripture that you're incorporating with that or something, I'm assuming, or not?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And sometimes it is an exegesis type message where it's all in a passage, neatly tucked away, and you can just preach that. Once you've done that a few times, I don't want people to say, "Oh, it's time for him to get out John 5 or whatever." In the State of the Church address, the folks know I'm not looking to preach a sermon this week. I'm looking to orient the church, and that's why we say it's different, right? And there's, I think for some that's a little taboo, and I don't think it should be necessarily, because we can do different things on a Sunday morning as long as we don't get carried away with it, right? So I would say when we reiterate it in the fall, it's much more like a sermon. But what we're doing in the fall, we do this event in the fall every fall. We call it the funnest weekend ever. I don't know why, but we do. And it's a ministry fair where we get everybody involved. We cut our services short. So we have an hour and 10-minute service. We'll cut it down to 45 minutes, dismiss it early so that people can get involved and see all the ministries that are happening here today. Well, to me, that's a very good use of our time together, right? There was one time we did a series called I Care, which was all about evangelism and serving and loving people. And I canceled services on a Sunday. And we all went, in an organized way, we all went and served in our communities that Sunday instead of gathering together. So you can't do that every week, and nor should you, but you don't have to be afraid to be creative. And by the way, if you're reaching a 24-year-old unchurched person, that will have a much greater impact on them spiritually than listening to a sermon. Like they'll buy into that, right? So I think I'm not a throw the baby out with the bathwater. We normally have church and it's preaching and worship, and our services are actually pretty simple. They're just loud, but they're pretty simple. But we'll do stuff like that once in a while to do it. And so the state of the church address would just, that expectation would be there, that Jeff's not going to preach for 35 minutes, but we're going to just focus on what God is doing here.
Yeah. How many people are in, like where the Bath campus is? How big is that community?
Bath itself would be 10, 15,000 people, not real big.
Your community at the church then, with
The greater Akron area is probably 300 to 400,000 people. Yeah.
church, is that what you're saying?
Say that again? No. Well, we would have about 8,000, yeah, but the area would be much bigger than that, and that would be through all of our campuses. Yeah.
The reason I ask is you have a lot of us, who are in a smaller community. Obviously, you have the people group to pull from, but I think we do too. How do I keep my focus to not have the 8 to 10,000 when the 250 to 300 may be 8 to 10,000 on my scale? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So numbers are irrelevant. They truly are. Sometimes they say God calls some people to be a missionary in Africa, and God calls some people to pastor big churches. I don't really enjoy the ramifications of our size.
Well, that's what we get from our people a lot is our church members or regular attenders or whatever are always, because of Rick Warren's fault or whoever fault started it, are looking at numerical expectations. Our church was full on Easter. Now it's not. You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, there's always going to be a pressure to get numbers around. But if you talk to any healthy church, even like a Rick Warren, he didn't set out for big numbers. He set out to reach people. And so the measurement is not numbers. The measurement is health. Because big numbers doesn't equal health, and neither do small numbers. So some of the most dysfunctional churches I know are big, and some of the other most dysfunctional churches I know are small. And some of the healthiest I know are big or small. So when we're looking at our church, we're looking at the health, what we would call health.
Then? Are you preaching health and stay of the church?
Oh yeah. We're not. I rarely go over numbers. So I'll use percentages, not we had this many and we had biggest Easter. We never talk about that stuff. What I'll say is, our goal was to have 10% more people in biblical community than we had last year. That kind of thing. Our goal, like I have a numerical goal across all of our campuses right now. I would like to see conversions up 20% in the next year. Because I looked at our numbers, our conversion number is trending flat. My attendance numbers are trending up. To me, that's a major health indicator of something that's unhealthy. Same thing with biblical community. If our biblical community, Now remember, I started with 100 folks. So when we were 250 people, I was looking at the exact same indicators and caring about them. So numbers are numbers. Don't be swept away. It's just not that big of a deal. There's all kinds of reasons why churches grow and all kinds of reasons why churches don't. What we, as pastors, have a better ability to deal with is health. So if we're not reaching people, we're not healthy. If we're not teaching God's word, we're not healthy. If people aren't sharing their lives in biblical community, we're not healthy. If we're not learning, if we're not worshipers, we're not healthy. If we don't care about the rest of the world, we're not healthy. Does that make sense? And then the numerics of that is whatever it's going to be, one way or another. When I was looking at Rick Warren and Hybels, those guys back in the 90s when I was getting going, I wasn't captivated by their numbers. I was captivated by their thoughts. Like, why did you do this? Why did you come up with shape? Oh, that's why. Why did, like Hybels, it's like, why did you're doing this really creative thing. I don't care what you're doing. Why are you doing that? When you solve this problem that way, what was the thought process that led you to that solution? Right? And I would go, Newt was in town still. He had these, what are they, Super Tuesdays or whatever they were? It's always something super with Newt. And so I go up there, and he'd have in the Simple Church guys, or he would have whoever at the chapel, and I would sit there, and I never really cared about exactly what they were doing. I wanted to know why they were doing it. When Newt did all these TV commercials, he still is kind of famous for that in Akron. I never cared, like, Newt's on TV. My question was, oh, that's really interesting. He never sells the chapel. He helps you in his commercial. See, there was, and I don't know how strategic all that was, or that's just your personality, but it was what he was doing that was so interesting to me. It was never like, man, I wish I could get on TV too. It was more like, oh, that's really interesting. Like when he's reaching out to the community. Because, for instance, this is back to this method. I would never go on TV now. It's a waste of money. Right? My marketing budget literally is 5% of what it used to be. We don't pay for marketing. You don't have to, right? So all that's always going to change. But I bet you the things that I observed the chapel doing 20 years ago are still in the DNA of what we're trying to do. That makes sense?
And so we've seen the rise and fall, and we're in another uprise, but you have some of the people, even from 10 to 15 years ago, who equate success with numerical growth. Mm-hmm. They say, where all people go, where they come, why are we not big anymore? And I'm like, we're healthy, we're doing okay, just stay the course.
Well, I might push back on that a little bit, because I would say I'd say healthy things multiply. They grow, then they multiply. So if I was at a place 5 years and it never grew numerically, I would want to know why. Now, if it didn't grow numerically because a bunch of folks had to leave and we got a bunch of new folks in, I would be fine with that. I have one of our campuses just went down numerically because they just planted another campus. They just multiplied. I'm fine with it, right? But I'm gonna look at the numbers as a health indicator. If my pulse is rapid, I want to know why. If my pulse is weak, I want to know why. Right? But I'm not going to look at the numbers as a win in and of themselves. Same thing with dollars. You can pay your bills and be dying. I know a bazillion churches like that. Okay? You can be in a budget crunch like Grace Church is in right now and be thrilled about it. There's a very positive reason why we're in a budget crunch. I just cut my budget by 10% in the middle of the budget year. Okay? So we're gonna notice all those things, and I'm going to want to see us grow, but I'm going to want to see us reaching people. If we just grew 100 people because a church split, I'm actually going to do my best to run those people off in a loving way for the sake of Jesus. But I don't want them, right? I want to see us. But if we grow, if we actually hit a 20% conversion rate, we'll grow. That's good. But we're not trying to hit that conversion rate to grow. Trying to hit it because we should be able to do that, and we're not putting enough energy into it. So if we shift our focus, we'll achieve that. Okay? Great questions. Okay. Number 5. Let me show you some ways then to start implementing some of these things. Number 5 is shoot bullets before cannonballs. Shoot bullets before cannonballs. So here's a great book for you. A great book is a book called Great by Choice by Jim Collins. Jim Collins wrote Good to Great and Built to Last. He also wrote a fantastic new book called How the Mighty Fall. Fantastic book. But in his book, Great by Choice, he has this picture of cannonballs and bullets, and this is his illustration. He says this. He says, imagine you're in the 1800s and you're on a ship, and you look in the background and there's a pirate ship coming and you see it. And you look at your ship's resources and you have enough gunpowder to shoot 2 cannonballs. He says, let's say that you shoot the first cannonball and you miss the pirate ship by 20%. You adjust dramatically and you shoot the second cannonball and you only miss the pirate ship by 10%. You're still dead. He said, instead of shooting 2 cannonballs, what if you shot 10 bullets in 1 cannonball? What if you used less gunpowder in a musket and you shot a bullet and missed by 20, shot a bullet, missed by 18, shot a bullet and missed by, and you dial it in, and on your 10th bullet you finally hit dink and you hit the ship. Then you shoot your last cannonball and sink the ship. So we talk a lot about shooting bullets, not cannonballs. And when you're seeking to implement vision, by the way, does that illustration make sense? Okay. Jim Collins does it a lot better than I do in his book. But when you're seeking to implement vision, we shoot many bullets before we shoot cannonballs. So we try stuff. Use the word, let the vision leak. That's a huge part of it. And we will be very open with everyone involved that we are trying something. And it very well may fail. Okay? So we just this last fall got to open up a new idea for ministry, a sports ministry. That's something I've been dreaming about for a long time. There are years of bullets that were fired in sports ministry. Okay? So there was a golf outing bullet. There was a 5K bullet. There was a kids soccer camp bullet. There was a have all of our guys play in the City League softball teams bullet. Some of those bullets hit the mark. Many of them were failures, but it was no big deal. You said, yeah, we're going to try this, doesn't work, we're going to kill it, right? When we felt like we had dialed that in so that a sports ministry wasn't about sports, it was actually about discipleship, because the only thing we do is know it, live it, give it away. So if we couldn't figure out how to do live it, discipleship, we weren't going to do sports. Okay? Once we dialed that in, we shot a cannonball. And we sank lots of leadership credibility and lots of energy and lots of money and all the things that come with the cannonball. So when you have this vision, you're working this vision, don't swing for the fences. Right? Bunt. Right? Do little stuff. Don't look and find the leader. Try several leaders and see who's actually the best at it. Okay? Don't drop everything and do that. Do that in addition to everything, and as the new thing starts to get traction, let the other things atrophy. Right? And shoot lots and lots of bullets. what happens as you do that is you're able to actually understand things as they happen too. So I'm pretty convinced it takes 3 to 5 years to get a real solid vision, a comprehensive vision in place. Which means this: when I have a new idea on year 1, I don't know what I'm doing either. I can't even lead the process well, right? If I put all my credibility on an unproven idea that's led by an unproven leader and it fails, I'm up a creek. If I put a little bit of my credibility on an idea and we play with the idea and refine it over time, then what happens is it becomes a proven idea before we actually go all in with it. Okay? So I love that bullets and cannonball things. By the way, that's also a great way to make changes at your church. Shoot some bullets at it. Don't change your worship style overnight. Interject a new song. Don't have a band leading worship. Don't go from a piano and organ to a band in 1 week. Introduce the guitar gradually, right? And just little bullets, and people do that. We've done that with video at our church. We said, hey, we think we need to start using video. Everybody was like, video? Why don't I just stay at home and watch TV? And, all those kind of things. We're like, okay. So what we did is we started, we don't have that big of an auditorium. Our biggest auditorium actually is not really that big. But we put up, it's called iMag. When I preach, you see me live, and then you see me on the screens. Well, we don't need those screens. You can see me just fine. We put them up there so that 4 years later, when we needed to open a video venue, I could look at everybody and say, hey, you guys know how when you sit in service, you kind of watch the screens anyways? Oh, yeah. I guess that's what we do. That's all we're talking about. Okay. It was a non-issue, right? So those were just little bullets that we shot around. By the way, when we finally introduced a full-blown video venue, it was our 4th try. So we learned, failed, learned, failed, learned, failed, learned, and finally got it right. Okay, so lots of bullets. I put a note here: paint, color, and cool stereos don't make the car run better or faster. So what those bullets do is they let you figure out the mechanics of how that new vision can work out. Does that make sense? Right. Number 6 then is structure for the vision. So we're going to, once that vision is kind of documented, we're working at it, then I'm going to build the structure around it. Okay. So what happens a lot of times when we have an idea, one of the first things we'll say is, well, I don't know if I have the money. That's a bad question. Start doing the idea. Don't worry about the money. If it's going to cost a bazillion dollars to do it, then you're probably starting with a cannonball, not a bullet. Okay? So if you have a new outreach idea, get a few people and start doing the outreach. It's one of the things I'm so grateful that I had to when we started at Grace, we didn't have any resources. So we had to take our vision and we had to prove it and work it without financial resources. There just was nothing to work with, right? We had 100 people in a very broken down building. That's all we had. So our first capital campaigns literally were like, get the building to work right kind of stuff. If you turned on the sound system and brewed coffee at the same time, you'd blow the breakers. So we had to brew coffee in the nursery. I'm not joking. Brew it in the nursery, walk it over to the lobby so that we didn't shut our sound system down in the middle of services, right? One of the biggest things that I'll do for our young staff, because they come on to a church now that has some resources, is I'll make them do things with no money. And I always tell them, you'll thank me later. Right? When you have too much money and too many staff, you quit developing people. So I'll make them. I won't give them anything, so they have to develop people and they have to get creative and they have to work hard to do it. So it's only later that you would put in budgets You calendar your vision. Okay, so it's at the top of the to-do list. You start staffing for your vision. Okay, worship is a huge part of what we do at Grace. Also, I hired a worship guy, an outreach guy, a small groups guy, and we call it biblical education or Christian Life Electives guy before I hired a youth pastor. Right, so that all the staff dollars, they got put into a children's ministry guy was in there, because children it's another conversation, but all the dollars got in there for the vision pieces first, and then the other staff that we've picked up has been kind of filling in the blanks there. Right, now guess what the people were asking us to hire first? A youth pastor. Right? So I had to communicate why we were not responding to the desires and the demands of the people. And I had to walk them back through the vision and say, now, is this what we're after? Yeah. All right, well, this is where the money's got to go. Because we can handle the youth ministry right now with volunteers and interns. We can't handle this other stuff without staff people right now, okay? Your best volunteers should go at the vision, right? So our most capable volunteers are always tied to our weakest point that needs shored up for vision, and we will move volunteers that way. So you might have a volunteer over here and they're just like amazing in the whatever department, the children's ministry department, and all the parents love them, all the kids love them. And you look at that volunteer and say, they are amazing. And there's 50 other people who are very, very good. But over here on the vision, I don't have an amazing person. We're going to let these very, very good people handle this. I'm going to ask this mega leader to come over here and work on this for me, right? Because they're going to think it, they're going to feel it, and they're going to build a new team. And now instead of 50 people involved, they're going to have 100 people involved, right? So we'll actually move our volunteers around like that. Sometimes we've had to fire volunteers. That's never fun. We try to transfer them. So we try to help them find another place, but sometimes they get a little stubborn about it. And we've just had to say, listen, you just can't do this anymore. You're just not our best foot forward. Okay? So we're starting, now see what we're doing? We're organizing around this. We're structuring for it. We give our best energy to the vision, so the vision gets the best of everyone. So that's when you start letting programs atrophy. Okay, because many programs, you throw enough time, energy, and money into them, you can resurrect them. But if they're not on vision, we're going to let those atrophy, and we're going to throw our time, energy, and money over here to these things. Right? Any questions about that structure?
Could you give your last comment there about firing volunteers? Could you elaborate a little bit more, give an example of a few times or one time when you've had to try to shift someone? And in particular, I'm thinking of people who are unhappy with when they have to be shifted or let go out of a certain role.
Yeah, so there's a lady that I loved a lot named Mary Lou Cunningham. She literally was a biker chick. I mean, hard back in the day when like you gave yourself a tattoo with your cigarette butt kind of a thing. And she came to Christ in a radical way, but struggled with her renewed life. So she loved kids, and she was working with our 4-year-olds, and one Sunday I found out that she slapped and cursed at a 4-year-old. And it's not because she was mean or a jerk, it's because that's who she was, and the kid wouldn't listen, and she said, why don't you stop it, you little blank, and that's how Mary Lou talked, you know. And so I'm like, well, that probably isn't going to go well long term. So it's like, well, she's off the children's director candidate list. So I went to her and I said, hey, Mary Lou, listen, first of all, you can't hit one of the kids. You can't use foul language in Sunday school. And what I did was I started talking with her and saying, what is your actual heartbeat? What do you actually care about? I just love little kids. Well, how come? And we got it. And nobody loved her when she was a little girl. That's why she loved little kids. I'm like, okay, so that was a process. We discovered that. And I said, Mary Lou, listen, you're not really teaching 4-year-olds because you love to teach 4-year-olds. You're teaching 4-year-olds because you love kids, you love to serve them, and this was the slot. Can we agree? And she's like, yeah, that's true. I said, you probably get frustrated and impatient in there. Yeah, I do. And I said, what's your favorite time of Sunday school? When we do the crafts. I love doing the crafts with the kids. She loved it. And I said, you know what would be so helpful? We really need, and I wasn't lying per se, I was being creative, but I kind of made this up on the spot. But I wasn't lying or manipulating. We just hadn't talked about it as a church yet. But I said, you know what we really need, or what we could really use? If somebody would sit in the children's hallway, we had a room down there. If you could prepare crafts for like all the grades, most of the teachers don't do crafts because they don't have the time to get the stuff together. Boy, if we had like Craft Central and the teachers could walk by and grab their craft bag and have it in their classrooms, and we have this room down there, we could make it the craft room, and I'll try to get some money together and we'll buy you some stuff, and we could leave the door open and the kids could say hi to you. Well, she thought that was the greatest thing ever, because it was actually stressing her out to be with the kids, but she loved them. So we transferred her. She passed away. On her tombstone, it said craft lady on it. So that was a big win. I had to fire a sound guy once, and I just said, hey, man, listen, he was the sound guy that just would not pay attention, and then the sound would squeak, and he'd throw his hands up like this. I'm like, why don't you go ahead and place those back on the board and adjust some things, you know? So I just said, Joe, listen, man, this is not for you. Well, he got really, really mad. Wouldn't talk, left the church. This guy's got a lot of pain in his life. That's the way he reacted. Well, there was a time that I was going between two buildings and preaching at two different buildings. And I'd been looking for a niche for this guy, but he's no good with people. He has no patience, right? But I needed a driver to drive me back and forth. And what he's always on time. He does not bend any rule. I actually needed somebody who would do the speed limit, because you feel a pressure when you're late and you want to speed. And I'm like, and he needed to have something that he believed significant. So driving the senior pastor for him. He drove me for 4 years. We became great friends. The trust level went through the roof. This last Christmas, long story, but I needed that to happen again. I was like, hey, Joe, can we get the band back together? Get in. Hot coffee for me every time. 80s music, because we'd always joke about 80s music playing. See, so I couldn't find a transfer for him, but I could find a relationship with him. And then there's been people that I've just said, listen, you can't do that. And they've left the church, and they don't like me anymore. But we're called not just to shepherd the sheep, we're called to shepherd the flock. And when the sheep is hurting the flock, the shepherd has to intervene. And it does not mean the sheep's a goat or a wolf, right? Sometimes, but not usually. It often just means they're just not in the right spot. So I look for transfers. I try to always look for relationships, and I don't always win. And we still do that a lot. Yeah, and that's yes, for sure, because that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. For sure, there are lots of people that could do better if they knew what you were asking them to do. You know, and so we do a ton of that. It just gets touchy when the soloist doesn't realize she can't carry a tune, and you know those kind of things. It's not going to help, not a thing in the world, right? So you just have to intervene because everybody is cringing. And the new person is like, what in the world did I just walk into, right? So you gotta stiffen your spine a little bit and go deal with what you got to deal with. Okay. Number 7, work. Work. I like this little saying. I don't know who came up with it. I say it all the time. Work like it's all up to you. Pray like it's all up to God. You guys ever heard that? I like that little saying. Work. And you're going to see me light up here a little bit for a second. This is a hot button for me. I have a terrible time relating to a person who gets paid to serve Jesus and is not motivated by that. I just don't get it. I don't get the attitude. I don't get the lack of gratitude, and I don't understand why it's hard to pop out of bed in the morning, right? Now, that's not always fair to people. We have different personalities, and we have different pain in our life. But on my teams, I am very clear with the people that work for us that you're going to work. This is a hard job. It's a 24/7 job. It's a personal job. They don't attack the office of the senior pastor. They come after your throat. And everybody knew what we were signing up for when we got into it. Right? So when I have a vision and when I believe God has called me, I have to work at it. And there are times, I'm not trying to guilt trip any of us, but there are times that when I am having a discouraging moment, which are legitimate, and when that discouraging moment turns into a pity party, this was me driving out here yesterday, woe is my miserable life, right? I should go be a CEO of a company, make some real money, get right, all that junk that goes through our head. There are times that we need to go revisit Paul's writings. I was shipwrecked. We need to go reread and revisit Jesus' life and remember that we need to go I'm going in a couple weeks to Chad. I need to go hang out with my colleagues in Chad, Africa, right? And just shut up. Because I have it good. I have it easy. And especially with vision, I get to work on what I believe in and dream about. How many people get to do that for a living? Very few get to get up every day and work on what they believe in and dream about. So all the frustrations are real, and burnout's real, and discouragement's real. I don't want to minimize that, but it's kind of the optimistic side of it, right? That most men and women get up every day and their goal is to get through their labor so they can go live the way they want to live. We get to get up every day and we get to go do what we believe in and dream about. And it's a privilege. So vision takes work. And here's a couple things I wrote down. These are big deals to me, okay? When you're talking about vision, if you're not willing to finish it, don't start it. If you're not willing to finish it, don't start it. The biggest barrier to many leaders' vision is the incomplete vision of the last leader. So we get into these churches and we wonder why the people don't trust us. It's because you're the 5th guy that came in and said, I know how to change the world. And the other 4 left. He went and he deconstructed and didn't take the time to reconstruct. So with vision, you're not going to see your vision take hold for 3 years. You're not going to see it have skin on it for 5 years. and people aren't going to buy into it till about 7 years. Not all in, no brainer buy-in. Okay, it's a process, and if we believe that God has called us to this work, then we better dig our heels in and do it. Now there are very legitimate reasons to leave a church. I'm not trying to guilt trip anybody, but I'm just saying, I think we often look at other people doing what we dream about doing, and we see the matured version of their vision, and then we get upset and frustrated because our vision isn't happening, and we don't see the 20 years of backstory before that became a reality, right? I remember when we were building our first building. I was 5 years into Grace. God had blessed. We needed to build really bad. And did all the, by the way, I think most people build too quickly. But anyways, we did all the research. Everything that we needed to do, kind of run out of options. We kind of where we were at, right? And we had decided to build. And I told my wife, Heidi, I said, the day before we were announcing the building, I said, if we're ever going to leave, we're going to leave right now. And she said, how come? I said, because I am not going to get these people into this and not lead them out of it. I love them too much. I'm not doing that. And if we're not committed to stay for a 20-year mortgage, then we don't have any business casting this vision and getting them into this mess, right? And sometimes you don't take that as a legalism, right? But it's that kind of a commitment. If you're gonna start changing how Sunday mornings work, take the hits and lock in and get them through the process, right? If you're gonna do away with Sunday school and go to an ABF model or to a cell model, dig in and finish it. That's where we are shepherds. And if we're going to take our flock somewhere, we don't point them toward the mountains and say, let me know when you get there, right? We make the climb. So I'm pretty passionate about that with this. And this is where doing your homework, it's not throwing 1,000 ideas at people. It's doing the homework of, no, I really believe I am called. I really believe that God wants me to do this, and I'm really committed to doing it. So at Grace, this is how much this means to me. I asked God, at Grace, I put Grace on a 50-year vision plan. And I asked God to give me the strength and the credibility to lead all 50 of those years. So I plan on retiring when I'm 72. I was 22 when I asked the Lord for this, right? So when I'm 72, and then I plan on dying when I'm 82. That's another issue in June. But anyway. So, but I basically said, Lord, I would like to go someplace and be there a lifetime. Akron, Ohio would have never been on my wish list ever. But if you let me go someplace for a lifetime, give me a church, because I went to an existing church that I can work within, a leader that I can love, Bob Combs. God gave me all of that. And now it's like, well, okay, you keep up your end of the deal, Jeffrey. Work. Don't take that offer. Don't jump ahead when nobody calls anymore, but when you're in your 20s and 30s and you're a hot shot, everybody wants you to be the succession plan. Now I don't make the list, because you got to be under 40. So like nobody calls. It hurts a little, I'll be honest with you. But it's, right? So this is a big, big deal. And one of the reasons many of you do not have credibility is because the guy before you blew your credibility when he quit halfway through the project. So you're overcoming the normal stuff, and then you're overcoming everything, the mess that guy left you. That makes sense? Yeah.
talking about here and shooting bullets before cannonballs? Because earlier you were talking about experimenting a little bit and trying things out, and now you're saying finish what you start. What's in that category of things?
This is when it's time to fire the cannonball and you fire it, right? Another illustration that Collins uses in that book is he uses the illustration of the 20-mile march. So he tells the story of the two explorers who were racing to the South Pole. One of them would do, and I'm condensing this dramatically, one of them would do this. When the weather was nice, he would march 40 miles. When the weather was bad, he would stay in his tent. The other one, when the weather was nice, he'd march 20 miles. When the weather was bad, he'd march 20 miles, right? And the concept is this. When things are going smooth, you recover, you rest, and you reload. When things are going rough, you put your head down and you keep moving. And I think that's the way ministry plays a lot. So this is Grace's big vision is to start 30 campuses in 30 years, minimal. So that vision has been worked on, refined, lots and lots of bullets. We only announced that vision 4 years ago, right? Because we had a whole bunch of other stuff to do. So we took 10 years before we announced that vision. So once we announced it now, it's putting our head down. We're making decisions that set us up for a long haul. And when, like right now, I'll just be honest with you, right now, we're broke. We've launched 2 campuses and 3 locations in 2 years. So it's a stormy day, right? We had to cut budget. Who's going to announce that? I'm going to take the hit for that, right? Now, our folks love me and we'll be fine, but I'm like, no, because I took all the credit, right? I didn't take it. I get it. I get the credit. I need it, but the church is not freaking out because they knew we were getting into this. We're having meetings where I'm saying, hey, when this happens, this happens, this happens, what's going to probably happen? And they'll self-diagnose. Oh, I see. So see why we're tight? Yeah. Here's our plan to not be tight next year. Okay. Right? So it's putting the head down, and between Bob Combs and myself, between us there would be 65 years of unbroken leadership. Okay, so that putting your nose down and keep moving, well, that credibility catches up with you, and it lets you go on the bad days too. But it's the implementation. It's not the bullet firing. That takes commitment too. But the consequences are so little with that. If that idea, if we used to do a thing called deeper services, and they just bombed, well, who cares? It's not the end of the world, right? If we launched a campus and it bombed, yikes. So every campus is a cannonball. So we needed to learn that. It's a great question. Okay. We're going to work. Number 8. I don't know why I said number 3. Number 8, implement your vision in blue oceans. Another great book called Blue Ocean Strategies. You should read it. Blue oceans just means this. I'm going to look for place. You have to read the book. I called it that so you would remember the name of the book. But this is the concept. I'm looking for places in the business world, we would call it untapped markets, right? So instead of looking and saying, I'm going to have a Taco Bell right next to a McDonald's, right next to a Pizza Hut, right next to a Burger King, right? That's a crowded ocean. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to invent Chipotle. There's nothing like it. And nobody's doing this, right? And I have a vision, Chipotle's vision. Watch it on Netflix. It's called Inside Chipotle. You can watch it. Their vision was to create fresh food that was fast and inexpensive, but fresh. Okay? You guys ever go to Chipotle? Long lines, you're through in 5 minutes. It's amazing, right? It's as fast as a drive-through. Okay? They only serve about 10 things. So they got this whole strategy. But instead of coming up with a better hamburger or a better taco or a better all-you-can-eat nacho Mexican place, they reinvented into a brand new market. So one of the things I encourage you to do when you're implementing vision is to find that blue ocean or that untapped market. So investigate the community, investigate the faith community, who are the unreached people groups in your community, and then tailor the vision to reach them. So one of our most exciting ideas right now is we're reaching out to prostitutes. Okay? And it's a blue ocean. In fact, the head of it just texted me on the break. It's a blue ocean strategy. So no one was reaching prostitutes, right? There's plenty of prostitutes in Akron. The faith community cared about prostitutes, but nobody had a strategy. Becky Moreland is a leader's name. She came up with a strategy, started to shoot bullets, was ready to fire a cannonball, and then started asking Grace to get involved. So we would look and say, that's a new idea. It's very exciting. It's cooperative. We're not trying to put the Baptist out of business, right? But it's an unreached group that we have a way to reach. When we started Grace, our big vision is we target. The viability of targeting is another conversation, but we target a 24-year-old unchurched person. The reason why we did that, in part, was because no one in Akron was targeting a 24-year-old unchurched person as a local church. There's lots of neat college ministries around. We weren't launching a college ministry. We were targeting them as a church. Big, sophisticated conversation around that. Well, people would look and say, well, how come Grace took off? Well, because we were connecting with people nobody else was competing for. So the way that the reason our music is the way that it is because it's geared to a 24-year-old unchurched person. So we didn't have to worry if we had a better choir than the House of the Lord or a better orchestra than, Maranatha Bible Church. We weren't competing. We were doing those folks didn't want to come to our church. Okay? So you're looking for that. You're looking to say, man, is there a gap? Is there something that the community needs that nobody's raised their hand to do? And can we tailor our vision to dive into that? Okay. Number 9 is adjust often. Adjust often. No idea or plan works perfectly in reality. And I told you a little bit about one of our campuses. I have a manual of how to start a campus in Medina, Ohio that makes a great doorstop. If you shredded it, it would be fantastic confetti. I had it all worked out. But in reality, there was a better way, right? So don't be afraid of that. This is where it doesn't matter if the building gets torn up. Our vision is to reach the city, right? Methods are not that important. They're just tools. And then number 10, I want to end with this one. Make $2 investments. Have you guys heard this concept before? There's a fantastic book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. You should read that book. It's a great leadership book. The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And Jeff Olson asks this very fascinating question, and I'm going to mangle my words with his words, so just know that. I might be quoting him, or I might be quoting myself, and to be honest with you, I don't remember what is what anymore. So this is the concept. I'll ask this question. If you spend $2 a day on a cup of coffee, is that a big deal? No, that's not a big deal at all, right? Spend $2 a day. If you put $2 a day in a savings account, is that a big deal? You're not going to retire on $2? Some of us are, but right. Now here's Jeff Olson's concept. Both of those actions are insignificant. That's why in our minds it doesn't matter if we choose either one, because they actually are both insignificant. To spend $2 on a cup of coffee once or to spend $2 in a savings account once, both insignificant, right? Right. If you repeat that same action every day for 10 years, is that significant? Right? Okay? That's the slight edge. We call it, on our team, we call these $2 investments. Okay? Me spending $2 on a cup of coffee does not matter. Honestly, for most of us, spending $14 a week on coffee is not the end of the world. Same thing with savings. I put $14 a week in a savings account every week for 10 years. It's a very different conversation. In our health, if we all decide after we release here to go get hamburgers and we have a nice big cheeseburger with French fries, is that going to kill us today? Yeah, yeah, I might be right now. But no, if we decide to go on a 2-mile walk because it's a pretty day outside, is that going to solve our health problems? If we repeat those same actions every day for over time. So the Olson concept is this: a small decision compounded over time equals a big result. Okay? One of the biggest things that I have to help our young leaders coming into our teams understand is that grace, church, the implementation of our vision was not one big decision. It was a zillion small, insignificant decisions. Okay? By the way, this is how our integrity works, right? Nobody gets up one day and like, you know what, I'm going to have an affair. What happens? You make a bunch of small decisions that desensitize you, and that affair is simply one more small decision. I work with my boys about this with their integrity. It's a big deal to me. And I'm like, I told them, I said the other day, this half-truth, right? This half-truth that you tell all the time, this exaggeration that you use all the time, has led you to where your siblings don't believe anything you say. I'm not lying, Dad. I'm not saying you are, son. I'm saying a small decision has now compounded on you, right? So with vision, this is massive. Massive. Our Newton and I's mutual friend who went and saw Bill Hybels, the problem was he came home and tried to change everything. He could have come home and made a bunch of $2 investments, and 3 to 5 years later actually had everything he really valued implemented, and nobody would have really cared. So when you're thinking about your leadership, before I make an announcement, if I was you, before I would stand up and make a big announcement about a big vision, I would have 1,000 cups of coffee. Right? I would look a person in the eye. I would get their feedback. I would ask for their trust. Right? Before we raise a bunch of money to go do something, I'm going to have 1,000 conversations about that. Right? And what we often see as big change or big exciting things is simply an outplay of 1,000 little decisions being made. And we talk about that a lot. I lost 20 pounds last year and have kept it off by making $2 investments. I just quit eating stuff. Wasn't that big of a deal. If you asked me, do you exercise regularly? I would say, yeah, whenever it's sunny and warm, I go running. I don't get up and exercise every morning. I probably should. I'm just not wired that way. But instead of sitting on a couch, instead of having a meeting, sitting down, we'll walk and talk, right? And I lost 20 pounds. I didn't go have liposuction. I just started changing the way that, and I would look, and I did this at lunch today. I didn't eat the bread. That's it. That's the diet. Don't eat the bread. So if we can think about this, because this is what happens, guys. We forget, this is all the way back to the beginning, we forget that you are visionaries. That's why you got into ministry. You believe something for someone they don't yet believe for themselves. What freezes us is we look and say, Newt's little graph, how do I get to A to B? And we think it's all one big step. It's not, right? So you don't have to ask, how do I go turn my church around? Don't ask that question. Go ask, how do I get a relationship with that guy and this family? See, little investments. And over time, that will multiply. There are unhealthy situations that you cannot win in. There are real reasons people have to leave churches. I don't want to guilt trip you or make your church's problems your fault. But I'm saying there are under-the-radar strategies, so to say, to get where you want to go. And that $2 investment's a big, big one for us. That we'll start moving it gradually. So by the time we fire the cannonball, the explosion of the cannon doesn't shock anybody when it finally goes off. All right. 2:30. Stay here.
Yeah, we're going to do questions for these minutes, and I have a couple to start. When you mention vision, say some things when you feel lonely about it. There are sometimes when you're all alone in your vision, and at first no one stands with you. Now you clarified with the $2 a day thing, but everybody in a vision, in whatever size church, is going to feel lonely at times.
Yeah. Definitely think you start tilling hard ground, right? I would say a couple of things. One is, it's where I think every leader has to go back to their relationship with God. And we have to look and say, see, I get a little emotional about this. I have to look and say, did you call me to this? And if you called me to this, then I'm holding, right? And I am not wired to be lonely. I am wired to be affirmed and celebrate all those kind of things. So to be lonely is a very difficult, discouraging thing for me. And I have to look back at the Lord and say, well, if I feel called to it, then I'll take any hit I have to take on it. The other thing that helped me a ton, back in the day when we started all of this, it was all, and if we were talking just about Grace Church, you would see some of what I mean. It was all kind of cutting edge and controversial. And what I also did was I would listen to people outside who affirmed. So that's why I liked Rick Warren. I didn't like Rick Warren because I wanted to copy Saddleback. I liked Rick Warren because he broke a mold, and he would affirm that I wasn't crazy for wanting to break a mold, right? Brad Powell is a friend up in Michigan. I remember he spoke at a conference I was at, and I went up to him in tears, and I said, this is the first time I've ever been at this conference that anybody did not basically call me a heretic, right? So I leaned into that. This is where Newt has become such a good friend, and where I would call him a lot, and toward, we don't talk as much as we used to, but I used to ask him all these questions, and then more recently what I'll do is I'll call him and I'll say, I'm thinking about this, am I crazy? And he'll affirm that I'm crazy or that I'm not, right? And that alleviates all that, because you get out where nobody knows what you're talking about, but if you can get around people who've been there, done that a little bit, and I don't mean this specific thing, I mean the leadership challenge. And they'll say, well, think about this or that, or you're not crazy. That's how I get through those times. Even now, it doesn't necessarily go away, but that's it.
How do you avoid, or Heidi, that's his wife, whom I taught what kind of man to look for. I don't know if you ever knew that.
No, you should have taught her better. She's kind of stuck.
How do you avoid or handle it when she says you're working too hard?
I listen to her, and I want to live with my wife in an understanding way. So When Heidi says I'm working too hard, what she means is I'm working too sporadically. And what Heidi wants from me is a predictability. So we have given up on our weekends. I don't come home on Sunday. I don't try to have dinner. We know that. But there's a rhythm to our schedule that as long as I am doing that, she's with me 100%. Yeah, and then she also sees me, like you saw some of my kids. I rarely go anywhere without one or more of my children with me, which I love to do. But that means the world to Heidi, too, and the kids. So it's stuff like that, trying to understand what she actually is asking me for.
You have great answers to lots of things, but just because of my age, I want to add to that. That's the best thing in the world to learn, because I always work too hard, but if my wife had predictability and we got away when we were gonna, and we had the evenings we were gonna, people can live with that. It's just that's great.
Heidi nor my children ever have been upset with me for an actual emergency. Never. We've come home from vacation, never bugged them. If I just don't communicate or blow it off, it's not a good night. Doesn't go well.
With the target of 24-year-olds, you still got a lot of older people, a couple of them from the chapel I need to talk to you about. Say something on the serious side. How did the older attach to that? Was it because they saw this place is going somewhere?
Yeah, in fact, one of our biggest growth dynamics would be people in their 50s and 60s right now. It's people who are come to grace through their 20-something-year-old children. Mm-hmm. And when they walk in, they see two things. They see life, which they're attracted to. These are the more mature people. They see life. So they don't really care about the volume of the music. They care about the dynamics of the life. And then the really mature people, I'm thinking of Dick and Patty Lee, who you know, they see opportunity. They realize, oh, all these kids need us. And I'm very quick to voice that. Like, we have lots of new believers, lots of young people, some mature folks with some marriage under them, stuff like that. Like, we desperately need that. And so they'll jump right in. They often don't jump right into leadership. That's kind of a little bit higher, it's harder to do. So they don't go like onto our board kind of a thing. They'll jump right into discipleship. And many of them don't like the music, but they'll hear us preach. We'll have people bring their grandparents. I'll literally watch them plug their ears, and they'll thank me for the sermon. Because they realize, oh, you're kind of an old-fashioned, I don't sound like an old-fashioned preacher, but if you listen to the content, you're an old-fashioned preacher, and these kids are listening to you. And they usually love it, and we need them. They are hot commodities at Grace, frankly. And I think they feel that when they walk in.
That's great.
Seeing the changes in their kids' lives.
Yeah.
Their kids getting plugged in, that's got to be a shot in the arm for sure.
And they'll see that light up, and now their grandkids are excited, and catches.
I don't know if you can shift to this. 2 times this week in churches I'm trying to connect or coach with, the church service, they don't want to change yet. There is so much for the veterans and age. And I'm trying to get them to do something for the young adults. In one case, just a sign that they actually have an associate pastor who's 30, a sign that he goes after them. Can you comment on that? You haven't had to do that, but in a sense you did that when you started working at Norton.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard, and I think it's back to asking them, what is your actual vision? If their actual vision is to keep the world out and make sure we all vote conservative Republican, that is a major uphill swing. If their actual vision is to love the lost and teach the Word of God, then it becomes conversations of, will you allow us to create platforms to do that for younger people? There are some churches, And we have taken over 2 dying churches that are down to the last 40 people. And there are churches that will run themselves to the grave because they will not change. And you can't do a ton for them. And to save them, you got to give in. I call it the CPR moment, right? You have to give CPR at the right moment. You give it too early, you're making out. You give it too late, they're dead anyways. So it's that right moment that you get in there where you can actually give life back. And it's a very delicate thing. The folks, when you do that with love and grace and patience, the folks that have real vision will actually come with you despite their age. The stubborn tribal chiefs, you're going to lose them. There's no way around it.
Have fun and have serious. I listen to Joel Osteen to stay awake when I'm driving all by myself, because I argue with him and say, no way, that can't work. Or take that to inner city Akron. What's the difference with what you said, which I loved, about believing for them? That vision is believing for someone. I mean, he'll tell you, your promise is there, you just haven't received it yet. I know you mean it a different way.
No, I don't. I mean it just like Joel Osteen.
Okay.
Whatever he says.
But would you say it with a smile?
just
Your
don't
promise, you're someone's miracle today.
Yeah, my teeth aren't white enough. Here's what I mean, guys. Honestly, I believe in the Word of God. I believe that for you. You know, I cry about that. I believe that if you knew my Savior, and if you would understand how deeply He loves you, and that everything that He gives us in His book is ultimately for your benefit. So people don't believe that. They think God's mad at them. That's what they think. They think the Bible is written to control them. That's what they think. They think that freedom is rebellion. See, that's what they think. So I believe something different for them. And even people who know Christ, they think that the height of loving Jesus is singing songs and sitting in a room together. They don't believe that if they would get up and drive 10 minutes to that ghetto, they would come alive spiritually and emotionally. If they would stop shouting down that person that disagrees with them and engage them in a conversation, they would come alive spiritually, emotionally, and intellectually, because they're not all wrong. See, so that's what I mean by it. I mean, I believe that God's Word can transform you and alter you and give you joy and everything that you're actually longing for in life. And you don't believe that for yourself. And I am an ambassador, a minister of reconciliation. So on behalf of my King, I want you to know that this is His heart and His mind, and I want to love you into that process. That's where, basically, whenever you involve the Bible, you're far away from Joel. So that's the big difference.
It's huge. And I know people go to your church and how they love you and respect you, and it's true of everyone in this room. I don't think we take the respect and use it the right way sometimes. We think, well, I don't deserve this, but to use it that way and to love them and lead them that way is so good. Anything from you guys before we close? Questions or clarifications? Yes, that wasn't a hand. Tim.
I'm always full of questions. I apologize. But in our church context, I often have lots of ideas to implement, but I'm also the only guy on staff. And I don't think your job's easier because you're more staff. I think that adds complications. But I'm also the one who has to delegate everything and come up with everything. And so my problem gets from having a vision to delegating the vision so other people carry it. Can you speak specifically to that, maybe to a context where I don't get to have meetings on a regular basis. I have to basically resort to the coffee talk, which you expressed is really important. But getting from having the vision to getting people who carry the vision for me, where I can delegate out ministry responsibilities. And it's slightly a different conversation, but it would help me think through this.
So I would move from working with the sheep to looking for the shepherds. And if you were going to prioritize your time, I would prioritize leadership development over counseling, for instance. Leadership development over socializing, right? I told one of our pastors, you need to quit your small group, which was shocking to him. I said, yeah, quit leading a small group. How come? Because you have people that you're shepherding in a small group. Let someone else shepherd that group. Start shepherding shepherds. And so the difference between addition and multiplication, and this is a big deal at Grace. The reason why we do what we do is because we believe in multiplication. So if God lets us plant 30 churches in 30 years, you multiply that over 100 years and it gets insane. If I get 10,000 people to come and listen to me, then I'm long dead. See, it's a different thing. Well, I'm going to think that way internally. So it's hard. The smaller you are, the harder it is because people are drawn to you at first. But making those little shifts where I am going to give myself to reproduce leaders is actually more loving to your flock. So sometimes I say, if you invest in leadership for 5 years, it'll pay off for 25 years. Okay? So it's hard when Susie over here is having a problem because we all love people. We want to run to her side. I'm actually loving her more and loving my flock more if I can get Susie to attach to her life group leader. And they actually do the pastoring. And I'm the consultant to the leader. And that takes 5+ years to get that moving. It's a ton of work. My largest staff area is Live It, which is all discipleship and leadership multiplication. Okay? It takes a ton of work. But it's a beautiful thing when this person has an affair and their life group leader is the one pastoring them. The life group leader calls me when they're stuck. I give them, and they go back. But I'm actually doing the body of Christ and not talking about it. I'm doing the priesthood of all believers, not just talking about it. In our campuses, when I walk into our campuses that I don't teach in, 80% of the people at those campuses don't know I'm their senior pastor. They wouldn't even recognize me, right? And that's that multiplication. So that's what I would do. If you're a youth pastor or whatever, I would be working with the youth staff more than the kids. If you're a small groups guy, I'd be working with the leaders more than the people in the group. Children's ministry, I'd be working with the teachers more than the kids. And we generate leadership that way. It's hard work.
It's great. I do, we do, you do. Jeff and I and Jim Brown, another Grace pastor up here in Goshen, do a thing each month called Pastorpedia. Wikipedia got their name from us.
We're suing.
Yeah, right. And this is Pastorpedia Live.